We begin with the first part of this session, which is going to be handled by Dr. Hiran Vedam. She's going to talk on commercializing clean tech innovations as an example of long gestation technologies. So let me briefly introduce Hiran. Hiran is a business fellow with the Breakthrough Energy Fellowship Program, bringing... Sorry?
I had changed this in my slide.
Oh, she was a business fellow, so it has to be X, sorry. She has worked across the globe supporting climate tech investors, startups, and early stage ventures. She's an independent consultant. She has led initiatives in technology transfer, entrepreneurship, and research commercialization. She also has a YouTube channel, World of Deep Tech, which is focused on educating researchers on deep tech commercialization. Very importantly for us, Hiran has been associated with Venture Center in our Atal Innovation Mission supported Prime program, and she has co-developed the playbook, which is the handbook for mentoring, which sets a framework for science-based startups. And thank you, Hiran, for your extensive contributions in that playbook particularly. Of course, she was a speaker and mentor in that 9 months long accelerator program. She is a co-founder and chief analyst at Ashwatha Sustainability Ventures currently, and with that background, Hiran, welcome to you to the session and handing over to you.
Thank you. All right. So before I jump into the session proper, I thought I'll give you a brief overview of Ashwatha, the organization I co-founded in October. Our vision is a sustainable global future based on breakthrough technologies that are coming out of India. And we identify, de-risk, and scale early stage technologies that is coming out of the labs that you represent. We have 3 different roles. One is teaching and coaching. So we have a Catalyst program. We did like early versions of it as mini courses at Venture Center. We've done a 3-day course at IIT, Tirupati, TIH. We are doing a couple more in the coming months. But it's basically takes the researchers through lab to market journey and equips them with various tools that are necessary to evaluate the technology at different places. We are also an exclusive licensee to First Matter Formula, which is a market intelligence framework to identify your first markets. We provide consulting to startups, and these are our immediate activities. Our long-term activity is a venture studio building climate tech startups. There we act as an entrepreneur where we identify technologies, we kind of do the due diligence and all of that. We are an operator, we build these companies. We are also an investor, so we put money into it as well. So before I go into it, if you decide to sleep over the next 1 hour, please pay attention to this first 2-3 minutes where I'll be giving you a very short version of it, okay? Too long, didn't listen, but at least listen to this. Our climate crisis is all well known to you. Today, our global temperatures are at 1.2 degrees above normal. Policy and finance could potentially support these, manage this climate crisis, but they are at various stages of failure. And we also have the problem of not in my backyard. I don't want these solutions in my backyard, or not my problem. The apathy that we see. And these are only adding fuel to the fire. The innovators and entrepreneurs that we all work with are the ones who are trying to solve for this problem. And the tech transfer offices that all of you represent are crucial to their success. You are the bridge, and you are the main bridge between what's happening in the research labs and the impact these innovators and entrepreneurs can create in the world. So that's my short version of it. Now I'll get into the longer version of it. So we talk about clean tech, climate tech. Before 2020, it was clean tech. And around 2015, pretty much the clean tech industry collapsed. Solindra in the US, went bankrupt, and that was the beginning of the end for Cleantech. And in 2021, after the COVID episode subsided, there was a renewed effort to invest more in solving for the problems that we have, and there was a lot of funding going into clean solutions or climate tech solutions. And so that included not just the traditional, clean tech solutions like clean water and all of that, but ag tech, plant-based foods, geoengineering, carbon capture, all of these were included. Whatever name you want to call it, you can call it clean tech, climate tech, but for me, it is about building a sustainable future for all. And this is what keeps us awake, and this is what keeps us going. You're probably familiar with this Earth Overshoot Day. If you look at how much resources we as humanity can use in a year, we have been overshooting it consistently. And can anybody guess what the date is for India, for the world this year? This was announced on the World Environment Day on June 5th. It's July 24th. So by July 24th, we as humanity have used up all the resources that we can, genuinely use for our living. So where is the rest of the resources coming from? From the future generations. So we are borrowing consistently from our future generations and depriving of the future generations of what they need to survive. And if you look at the carbon dioxide concentrations around the world, they have been going up. As of last year, it was around 428. Now it's around 430 plus ppm. Well, ppm doesn't sound too bad, right? Very little. It's needle in a haystack, right? But the consequences of this increase from 280, 320, something like that, to 430 have been devastating. The temperature, global surface temperatures have been consistently going up. And as of last year, it was around 1.2 degrees above normal. We've had consistently high temperatures. We are all living it. Every day we are encountering floods, fires, glacial melts, darkening oceans. We are hearing in the news so much that we are all desensitized to what's happening in this world. And 24 was the warmest year. Last 3 years have been consistently hottest years on record. And in India too, we've had loss and damage of crops, how much of extreme weather events we are seeing. None of this is news to us. We are seeing it every day, right? And there have been studies as to how much of that is attributable to climate change. And these studies have shown that consistently across the world, whether you're in the Arctic, Antarctic, Australia, or the Hawaii Islands, anywhere, you're seeing these correlating very consistently with climate change. And in India, we only have 13 studies that have been done to see whether there is an attributable source from climate change to what we are seeing. Of the 13 events, except for the floods in 2015 in Chennai and the Kerala ones, I think. No, this was the 2019, yes, Kerala floods. Most of these events are attributable to climate change. And 1.5, 2 degrees, what's the big deal? The consequences are devastating. We'll lose our coral reefs, we'll lose our crops, we'll lose several of our species. Sea levels are continuing to rise. And there is speed and scale is something that John Doerr in the US has put together, and they consistently track the progress of the world's efforts in reducing the carbon footprint and the consequences of climate change. And they have divided it up into different areas like transport, the grid, food, and other areas. Can you actually see it clearly? Okay, all right. All right, so I mean, we all know how much money and attention has been going into something like electric transportation, decarbonization of the grid. And we would expect that there's a lot of progress already made. But even in those areas where you're getting unreasonably a lot of focus, even there we are failing or insufficient progress. Okay, and I mean, we all know the problem called coal. Okay, we cannot live with it, we cannot live without it, right? And methane emissions from agriculture is the largest source of emissions in India. And how are we doing? Okay, so this is, yes, I mean, that's the state of affairs. But what's happening on the policy side, on the finance side? Let's look at it. I mean, COP29 that ended in November. The developing countries, especially the ones that are closer to the ocean, who are seeing the sea level rises, had asked for $1.3 trillion to help them tackle the adaptation issues related to climate change. How much did they get? 300 billion per year. And this is commitment that was made way back when the Paris Agreement was signed, that these historical emissions didn't come from these countries, and the developed countries who had to pay, they haven't been paying. Okay? The good thing that came out of it is the Article 6, 6.2 and 6.4 around like country to country carbon trading and like standards to strengthen, unreasonable exploitation of indigenous people and so forth, so on. But, and in COP29, all the countries agreed to submit their new nationally determined contributions by February. Today we are in what, June, end of June? Only 25 of the 217 countries have submitted their revised NDCs. And given what's happening in the US, things have become only worse. There is like, well, I mean, if those guys are doing, why we're not doing it, why should we do it? But it doesn't matter. If the house is on fire, whether you do it or they do it, consequences have to be borne by all of us, right? And there is, in COP28, which I was fortunate to be part of, there was a discussion around inclusion of phasing out fossil fuels. There was hitch, but in the end, it was introduced in COP28. But in COP29, the whole reference to it went off because it was held in Baku, and the Saudi objection plus, Azerbaijan's petroleum, being a petrol state, didn't help either. So the policy scene, the funding scene at the macro level doesn't look very good. And if you look at the US, I'm taking US as an example because this is the more recent events that are happening there that show the real impact your policy can have. And 2022, the Biden administration had introduced IRA to reduce the emissions to provide more impetus to climate tech ecosystem around like building pilots, scaling up, and so on. And the estimates in 22 showed clearly that with IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the emissions could really come down in the US. Okay? But, beginning of the year, what happened? And the scene has completely changed. So IRA is probably going, many of those articles may not survive what's happening in the US today, which means those emission reductions that the policy can enable aren't happening. Okay, and it's showing, the policy is also driver for investments. And beginning of 25, you can see a strong dip in the investments that are going into climate tech. Okay, that's US, why do I care, right? We are not doing any better in India, okay? Our nationally determined contributions are here. We need to be here in order to be able to get to net zero or reduce the emissions enough to be able to have, in order to avoid the climate change issues that we have. But on the positive side, okay, it's all bad news, but let me give you some positive news also. So the WIPO came up with Y02, so it makes it easier for all of us to track what are the technologies around climate tech that are happening. So every climate tech solution gets tagged with a Y02, so your IPC codes, so that it's easier for you to know what's happening. Okay, so that's good news. Okay. Similarly, WIPO came up with this program called the WIPO Green, where public-private partnership, so they post like different technologies that are available, different technologies that are looking for, so it's a marketplace that they have created. EBRD also created a green technology sector, so selectors, so at least people who are in that program have access to some of these critical technologies. Okay. Now, we all know that India is the third largest emitter, right? Do you know what's the contribution of India to the global climate tech solutions? Do you know what is the percentage? It's close to 2%. Okay? And I want to dig a little bit deeper and show you one example of a technology that is, yes?
Can you share a little more about WIPO Green, like maybe how it's relevant to this forum and what they do and what can be?
Well, it's a platform for sharing climate tech solutions, and where it's a marketplace. So you post what you have. You have the buyers or people who are looking for technologies post their requirements, and then if there is potential interest, people can match. So it's a platform for you to post any interesting technologies you have out there, and also like for your innovators or entrepreneurs to look at.
Like, what's their Indian thing? How active they are in India and how all of us can maybe go ahead,
it is available for anybody to post. I mean, what it was really meant as a way to provide access to developing countries to technologies that are available elsewhere. But I think, I mean, it's a platform where you can post either way.
NRDC is an Indian partner in the program.
Yes. Okay, so solar PV technology. I mean, I also want to kind of bring out what it takes to build these technologies. Okay, I mean, the original photovoltaic effect was identified in 1839, and only in 2011 we started to see the price drop to below $1 a watt, right? And if you look at India's solar policy evolution, it took like 2011 before we had even a national policy for solar. Okay? And so until it came to this point, we didn't even pay attention to it. Until it came affordable, we didn't. So we are not contributing to any of that. We are just contributing to that. What does that mean? Today, I mean, till very recently, we were importing everything. Only now there is a drive to, okay, you have to have indigenous cell manufacturing, module manufacturing, all of that. It's like, I mean, this should have been done 30 years ago, right? And I mean, whom do we thank for getting it down to this? Germany and China. Germany policies were very proactive in giving incentives to people to put solar panels. This was in 2008, 2006, around 2008 to 2011, around that time. And then China, of course, like took it forward, and the economies of scale that they were able to do and reduce the cost of solar just helped the world adopt solar that much faster. And if you look at India, so we have been, if you look at the price per kilowatt hour, it's at, in 2016 it was at 4 rupees. Today it's about 2.6, 2.5 to 2.6. So the right policy did help reduce the price, but the right policy came very, very late for us to own any piece of that technology. Right? And if you look at climate tech and the different technologies that we call climate tech and where they lie in terms of, like, you know, the your Gartner hype curve, or like, you know, where they are at and where India is investing. We are all looking at this. 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 5 to 10, none of this. If we really want to be a game changer in climate tech, if we really want to make a difference in this, own some of the fundamental patents, we need to be investing here. We need to be commercializing these technologies, because 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, those are the ones that will come there. And that's not what we are doing today. And climate tech has its own challenges, which are very different than, you know, your software or like blockchain or like fintech and all of that. And because they have very long deployment cycles, very long development cycles. And this, not only are the development cycles long, the sales cycles are also very long. And you add the startup element to it, we are adding the less predictable markets to it. And if you look at like market maturity versus cycle times, climate tech falls in a quadrant that corporates find very difficult to tackle. So it is for the innovators, it is for the entrepreneurs to do that work. But entrepreneurs have a less predictable market to deal with. The other challenge is most of the climate tech solutions go into industries which have very, very razor-thin margins. Whether you take chemical industry, basic chemical, I'm not talking about specialty chemicals, basic chemicals, or cement, shipping, all of these have like either very variable market margins or very thin margins. So you ask them to innovate in something that requires 7 years, 5, 10 years, it's like very difficult for them, okay? And the challenge today is that most of the solutions that can really come down to the economies of scale, or like, you know, the price points that are acceptable to us in India or most customers are not there. IEA's report in 2023 said 34% of the technologies to remove 34% of emissions that are required for net zero haven't even been developed or underdeveloped significantly. So if we don't invest in these, if we don't kind of bring them to the market as fast as possible, we are not going to reach net zero. And we know the consequences of not doing that. And the climate tech path to market is a little more difficult than the usual valley of death that we all know of. There's no one valley. There are multiple valleys. This particular valley, the first one, is the tech development value. Oh, the technology may not work. Oh, the cost may not work. Okay? That validation is the technology development valley. Now I say, okay, it works. How do I scale it? How do I show it to the first customer? How do I get my first demonstration done? Okay, demonstration done. Now I can sell? No, not so fast. Because to build a chemical plant or to build any process at scale, you need project financing. You go to a project financiers and they say, oh, this is too risky. So you have the first of a kind project risk. that you need to remove. And you have to demonstrate that. Now, first is okay. Then they'll say, okay, next of a kind. So there are a couple of different versions of first of a kind that you need to do before it is ready for scale up. And this path is very, very long. And these, I mean, who supports these kind of things? I mean, it's the same picture, different view. There is a significant challenge in grant funding for these, or who will fund these kind of things here, and especially the first of a kind deployment. So these are the two places where, for the climate tech, for all, I mean, many of you here are from CSIR institutes and IITs. So the kind of technologies we are talking about require this kind of funding. Okay? Now, just hang on into like, okay, so what does it mean to me? I'm a tech transfer person. Just hang on there. And I mean, this slide, if it was good, I think it would show you the amounts of funding that is required to go from one stage to another. Okay? All right, so maybe it's the investors who make the money, so why should I bother? Let them take the risk. The reality is, in climate tech, the exit pathways are pretty much limited to M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So somebody acquires it. There is no IPO, okay? Because, I mean, how many people would know any chemical company that produces the products they use? Nobody. People know a Colgate, but who knows who produces sorbitol? Very few, right? So, I mean, that's why it's an M&A market. And if you look at the recent acquisitions in the first quarter, you will see one trend. Many of them have very strong IP portfolios. So an IP portfolio is very important for climate tech companies to succeed. Okay, and this is also proven by some data from PitchBook in terms of like what is the value of the companies, what's the probability of the companies raising their angel round, their seed round, their Series A round, and all of that. Consistently, IP plays a significant role in their ability to succeed. And it is not like, oh, I have acquired some IP from the university, from research organization, and I go merrily build it. This was actually a company that I was part of. I mean, we had invested, where we had some technology from a research lab for materials. But our goal was a green window. Okay? So to go from here to there, we needed to develop all of these technologies. This is internal R&D. And who will fund that? We have to go to an investor. We go to the investor and say, we need money, all of this, because we have this. And then we say, oh, you may have a non-exclusive license. You may have a non-exclusive option. How are you going to get the money to build all of this? So as tech transfer offices, you have to think about what is it that we as innovators and entrepreneurs go through when we take this technology to create that and create the value in the market. Okay? And I'm giving you another example of a spin-off from MIT, Form Energy. So they started, the research happened between 2012 and 2016, okay, for battery chemistry. Iron air-based battery chemistry. And the company was formally launched in 2017. Between 2017 and 19, they tried to integrate it. They kind of went into, lithium sulfur, I think. They went down that rabbit hole. Then they decided, no, we should come back. So between 20 to 22, they again came back and focused on long duration storage solutions. And today they have 202 patents. Okay, they licensed some technology from there, from the academic institution, maybe 11, 12. And the rest of it was developed internally. So before I jump into the next phase, I want to kind of wake you up and give you a few takeaways if you didn't follow all the things I was talking about. One is that time is running out for all of us to solve for climate tech. And policy can be an enabler, but policy is challenging. We are seeing globally, and even in India, we are not doing any better. It's a long, hard road. And it requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnerships, and a lot of IP, and a lot of money, and of course, intellectual property. All right, so let me dig a little bit deeper into what does it mean for the commercialization journey and why you need to care about it in the next section. So if you look at the commercialization journey from lab, it looks like 4th stage. You start with what's in the lab, what we take from the labs. We have to do multiple pilots, multiple demonstrations, and maybe at the end of the road, we have a commercial product. So this is a proof of principle, test of science. We are exploring a lot of things. It's still pretty much a lot of divergent thinking. And when we start to build pilots, we are demonstrating like, it works at a scale that might be interesting to them. It is still in our labs. We are still mucking around. We are able to do some specific market-specific economics because we know, we have done some product market fit, so we know a little bit about it. So we can do market specific. Does it work in this particular market? What does it take? What does it replace in this market? How does economics look like? And we can share some data with the partners who might be say, oh yeah, interesting. Now let's kind of do something more. And then we are demonstrating it at a customer side. We are building it, we are making a product, giving samples to people to play around with. So now we are talking at a customer-specific level, okay? And maybe at that stage we will get some, offtake agreements. We are lucky. So use those offtake agreements to go raise project financing, some grants, some equity, all of that put together, do our first demonstrations, okay? And those first demonstrations are just the beginning because first demonstrations are okay, but if we want to scale them into 10 plants, 100 plants, we need to de-risk everything so that the infrastructure guys who don't know anything about technology, who look at spreadsheets, are convinced that this is risk-free. And that's when we have we get to some sales to customers. So partnerships become very important to us at every stage of this game, okay? So we have to co-develop, we have to get expertise, we have to talk to the research labs where we license the technology. We need equipment that we probably don't have as startups, so we have to go, beg, borrow, partner, all of that, right? And capital equipment, we may have to go to a customer and say, okay, let us do a run on your plant. Or like you have this, reactor that you're not using, can we just borrow it for a while? So there is a lot of and we have to go to the partners and say, okay, give me 10 units. And say, okay, come back and talk to me when you can buy 100 units or 1,000 units. So you got to kind of convince them. So you see, there is a lot of hustle. There is a lot of hustle, a lot of partnership. And there is a lot of risk in IP leakage, okay? So this is what the reality of building a climate tech startup is. I already told you about this. So, for a green window, what do you need? You need a conducting window. Try to get your glass to be conductive. We all do it today. Our phones have conductive interfaces, right? Transparent conducting touch screens. Now, if you try to put that on that, it won't be affordable, obviously, right? Because indium, gallium, they are very expensive. So we said, okay, let's do carbon nanotubes. Now, that's a whole new technology we had to develop, right? So, so that was one thing we had to develop. Then we needed a way to kind of coat it on that, okay? Do we spray paint it? Do we print it? What do? The way you do it will change the conductivity, the resistivity of the material. So there's a whole lot of research on providing thin films on those, okay? So that was the other thing we had to do. And then it just kind of evolves from there. So when you start to scale up, and there are a number of issues that come up that you won't see in, when you're doing it in a beaker in the lab. So Cambridge Display Technologies, how many of you are familiar with this company? Okay, so this is a spin-off from, of course, University of Cambridge. So they had a technology for fluorescent POLED, and they licensed it to CDT in '92. Okay, the core technology was going to expire in 2010. I mean, the 20-year deadline applies to all of us, right? So initially they said, oh, we'll manufacture the displays. And quickly realized they didn't have enough capital, although they had a lot of IP. They didn't have enough IP to do it. So they shifted their model to partnerships. Okay, so I mean, you might start off with something, you might end up with completely different thing, and this one illustrates that very well. So they started licensing it to different partners for different parts of the value chain that is needed. Okay, and they started signing joint development agreements. And they also created a small manufacturing facility so that they can, develop that know-how around how to manufacture these displays and package it and sell it. Know-how is valuable, right? So that's what they did in 2000. And then, I mean, the competing technology, phosphorescent OLED, was available and they acquired it in 2002. And finally, in 2004, they went IPO. Okay? I mean, UK has an AIM listing where you can do this, okay? This is not Indian, I mean, I think the AIM listing is a little more sophisticated than even the NASDAQ in the US, especially for more science-based startups. So by 2003, that's their model. So where did they start off? They're going to license everything. They are going to make it everything in-house. And they ended up pretty much having partnerships for every part of their value chain. And generating revenue from that, from all of that, okay? And that's, I mean, so as startups, you end up partnering with your parent lab, with other startups, with other labs. You also have to partner with government because there's a lot of policy. And you have to convince the government to slowly, change the policy so that it helps the kind of startups you are. So you end up having to partner with your competitor in order to do some of this work, and corporates. So again, how do you manage IP? How do you manage the relationship with all of this? And what is the implications of all of that in the licensing agreements we ask you as tech transfer officers? So keep that in mind. And this is another analysis that was done of 3 more startups in the climate tech space back in the Cleantech 1.0, and how they partnered with different organizations, and the requirement, again, emphasizing the partnership element to it. Okay, I'll give you one more example, Viridos. This is a company out of the US. They had a lot of IP around synthetic genomes. So they wanted to do sustainable solutions across multiple markets, from health to energy, like all scientists. Oh, we have technology, we can do everything. So that's where they started off with. And they got 600 million from ExxonMobil, not small change. And they shifted their focus mainly towards microalgae-based fuels. They engineered the algae to produce, for high yield and all of that. By 2020, Exxon kind of gave up on them. 2021. And so since their focus, and they built actually, I mean, if you go to the Arizona area, you will see their microalgae ponds. So they did actually do demonstration and all of that. But they could never, I mean, the numbers, the economics still was a struggle. So they repositioned themselves. Instead of we are a synthetic genomics company, we are a microalgae-based biofuels company. Now the timing, 2021, is around the time climate tech or Cleantech 2.0 started to take off. So it made sense, right? 23, they raised 25 million from Breakthrough Energy and got some offtake agreements from United Airlines and Chevron. And they had a major breakthrough in that now their microalgae can be grown in salt water. They are able to produce it at high yield and all of that. But to date, no revenue yet. Okay, some of these technologies take time. Over 100 patents, but no commercial sales yet. So before we go into the next part, which is where all of this comes to you, you may recognize this Zozila path in Ladakh, like Srinagar to Ladakh route, and how perilous it is if you have ever been there. But that is the commercialization journey. That journey you're seeing is what commercialization looks like for climate tech. It is a long and twisted path and requires significant investment and partnerships. And it takes a lot of know-how, grant support to build all of this. And it's an important, know-how is an asset, okay? And know-how that resides in your labs, know-how that we create as startups and within our companies, all of this is important asset. And we have to figure out how we'll monetize all of that. So what does it mean to all of you? I'm not going to talk about your invention disclosures, patents, and all of that. So that's already covered by Dr. Hirwani. What I'm going to talk about is what happens after that. Okay, the way we will transfer the tech, we get a piece of that to do what we do. Okay, so what are the steps in technology commercialization? Broadly, for you, when you're looking at it from your angle, it's lead generation, term sheets, contracts, transfer, compliance, and building that long-term relationship so you can sell more to the same customer or the same licensee. So lead generation involves creating technology offers, tech offers, marketing, responding to inquiries, and converting them into potential licensees, getting them to the table. Then you have the NDA, term sheets, all of this you know, so I don't need to go into it. The next part is where it becomes, your role becomes very crucial, okay? I'm not saying these are not important, these are very important, but that is where it really hits the road. And then compliance. Compliance is a full-time job. And of course, building it into a long-term relationship. We'll dig a little bit into each of these to understand what are some of my gripes, I guess. Some things I have observed and some things that are really hindering our ability to partner with academic institutions and what all of you could do differently. Think about it. The overarching thing that ties all of this is your IP policy. Okay, so lead generation. Let's start with IP policy. The way IP policy, at least I've worked with 2 academic institutions and trying to define their IP policies. And the way it works is cut, copy, paste. You take it from your other educational institutions that were drafted, I don't know when, that probably hasn't been looked at in a while, and you just use it because it's easier. Nobody will question you. And the head of the institution has a million things, recruitment and all of these things, and doesn't want to be bothered by something as, as trivial as IP policy. So you end up cut, copy, paste. But IP policy needs to be both transparent and publicly available. It's getting better, but it is still a challenge that I cannot find IP policies for most academic institutions or CSIR institutes today. And it has to be ecosystem specific. What works in Mumbai, IIT Bombay, doesn't work well for Gandhinagar or Tirupati, because they are very different ecosystems. They have Mumbai, you go to Nariman Point, all the headquarters are there, right? You sit in Tirupati, you try to reach anybody in Mumbai. It's an effort, okay? You have a different ecosystem, different set of constraints, but you are using the same IP policy. Doesn't make sense. And even today, like as of November, I try to get information about IP from certain government-funded institutions. I go to their website. They will ask me to pay upfront fee to get information about the technology. Not only that, also submit a business plan. Based on what? That one pager they have on their website that is outdated, that has nothing about the IP? How are you supposed to do that? Non-exclusivity trap. For some reason, we still haven't figured out when non-exclusivity makes sense and exclusivity makes sense. If you expect somebody to take something and generate revenue 6 months down the line, yeah, by all means do non-exclusivity. But if it's going to take you 7 years, like we are doing with Cleantech, giving me non-exclusive license or non-exclusive option, which I don't even know what it means, doesn't make any sense. Perpetual versus limited time license. Okay, we know how long it takes to build a climate tech startups. You tell me you're going to give me 5-year license. Who is going to fund me for this? 5 years, I don't even know whether I'll have a product or not. I know I'll have to do a lot of development for this. I need to raise millions of dollars to do this. You give me 5-year license. Does it make sense? And another thing, what are the agreements that you need to be doing in hard copy, in-person signing, whatever? What are the things that you can do, post-COVID? A lot of things can be done online. We conduct policy meetings online, but we still expect people to ship documents stamped in. It's just like, have to think about where it makes sense, where it doesn't. And IP policy plays an important role there. And what are the KPIs for the tech transfer offices? Is it the number of inquiries or number of successful closes? These are some of the things that we all need to think about when we are drafting IP policies. Okay, the next thing, tech transfer and websites. See, I'm somebody who is looking for IP. I'm looking to commercialize this IP, and then I'm building this whole Ashwata based on that. I go to websites. It doesn't speak anything. It just gives me very rudimentary information or one paragraph. Worse still, there are no search tools, so it's not easy for me to search for any IP. And no contact. And some of these patents were 2010, even earlier. Okay, if they're fundamental patents, yeah, but most of them are not. There needs to be a way for me to easily, quickly find what I'm looking for. It's almost impossible on most websites. And if these were published patents, if these are published papers, is there something wrong in just listing those published literature on the website? I can't find that for most patents or most tech offers that are presented on the websites. And make it frictionless. You want more people. As tech transfer offices, the role is to ensure commercialization of as many technologies as possible. So make it frictionless. At least get them in the door. Get the licensees in the door. Don't create so many barriers that people decide, it's not worth it. Okay, so finally, somehow I found the technology going. Term sheets, contracts. Licensing versus assignment. In the US, they have a Bayh-Dole Act, which prevents them from assigning a document. India doesn't have anything like that. Okay, are there situations where assignment makes sense? If a company has built their product based on that, they are generating revenue, is there a good reason for you to assign the technology? Have clawbacks, but is there a reason? So licensing versus assignment, have clarity on when you can do it and when you cannot. Non-exclusive, exclusive, I think you've heard enough about why you need exclusivity for what we are doing, what climate tech solutions need. Option agreements. Option agreements in India aren't used that much. I don't know why. But these are great ways to mitigate some of the risk that tech transfer offices perceive, and it also helps the startups get on with their commercialization journey. So use them judiciously. And know-how licensing. Know-how licensing can be done separately from patent licensing. In fact, we've done agreements in the past where we said, okay, X percentage for the patented technology, X% for know-how, because patent may or may not be granted, who knows. But if that fails, you still have the know-how license and the royalty that is coming out of that. And it is important for climate tech because we cannot take a patent that somebody gives and go commercialize it. There is a lot of hand-holding that is required between the research institute and the startup to take the technology, build, scale, and so on. So it's a very important part of know-how licensing. And again, I already mentioned about limited time license. I think perpetual makes sense, especially in cases where there is a very long road to the market. But again, like restricted licenses are problematic because you don't know what path you're going to be taking. You need to keep your options open and quickly react to what's happening. Okay, and restrictions on sublicensing, restrictions on various things will only make it that much harder to take the technology to the market. Yeah. And where does it make sense and why do you need those restrictions in the first place? Okay. If I'm doing climate tech, I need to sublicense to my suppliers, my distributors. I need to sublicense to my, outsourced partners for manufacturing. There are a number of things I need to slice and dice. If you look at the CDT example, imagine Cambridge had said, oh, you cannot license it to anybody. They would have been dead long back. They would not have gone to the IPO stage. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve with the restrictions is something we need to think about. And improvements. Recently I had a case where this institute tech transfer person said, every IP you develop internally, even though we had nothing to do with it, you still have to put our name on it. I asked him why. Oh, NIRF rankings. It's fully owned by you, we don't care. You do whatever you want, all that is fine, but we want our institute name on it. So again, this goes back to how we incentivize our tech transfer people and what are the implications of that in defining ownership of improvements. Okay, if all the improvements are done by the research institute, then yes, improvement is owned by the institute and you license it at some terms to be defined. If it is developed by the startup, it should be owned by the foreground IP, right? So it should be owned by the startup. And I think part of the reason is the misaligned KPIs. And payments. Okay, I mean, especially for these long gestation period technologies, see if you can take equity, okay, because it's a shared responsibility. And keep the time commercialization in mind, because it is a long journey and every bit helps. Okay, and royalty stacking, because I mean, if I license 10 technologies from 10 different places and all of you ask for 2%, 3% royalty, pretty soon I'm looking at eroding all the profit margins in there. So that's why there is, I mean, in the biotech industry, royalty stacking is very standard. And I think in climate tech too, you should start thinking about whether royalty stacking makes sense. Because when you do all of that, the total will not exceed so much and your proportion basically comes down. Term sheets and contracts, like some of the key challenges are long negotiations, because a quick turnaround time will help everybody to keep the momentum. And lack of clarity on the decision-making process. I mean, I can't even get to the, get phone numbers of the people I'm negotiating with. And that is a problem for me. Okay, and sometimes it is hard to balance the interests of the PI, the host institute, and licensee. We've had a case, I mean, this is not now, many years ago, where we negotiated an agreement, we signed it. Before we went to the airport, we got a call saying the PI is not for it, so this contract is cancelled. So, I mean, we were flying in. I mean, we had people from abroad. We were all negotiating it over 2 days, deep negotiation. You walk out, even before you get to the airport, 40-minute ride, we get a call saying, this is not acceptable. So aligning all those internal forces as a tech transfer office so that, when you represent the institute, that we can take it forward is important. And the maturity of the technology, you say 6, we say 3, and then figuring out where we lie is a challenge. And this is where the negotiations, the discussion across the table helps. If I'm doing everything by email, it's almost impossible. Yeah, I'll be done. And, again, incentives for the TTOs. What you measure is what you get. Tech transfer, okay, so we close the agreement. Hurrah! So we are ready to go. But, I mean, this is more, I don't know if it's a problem with research institutes, but this is definitely a problem with academic degree delivering academic institutions. Documents and data dump. Okay, so you licensed it. Okay, here is the folder. And sometimes with very little aid into what is there in that. Okay, and you try to say, okay, I want to talk to the PI because I've gone through all this, there is all these technical questions, I need to talk to the PI. Oh, PI, busy, can't access. Student, poor drug, left. Okay, or, either they left work unfinished and told his, friend, the junior, hey, I have to go take this postdoc position there, so I'll sort this out later, okay? So just tell the professor that it is done, but it's not done, okay? Or the person has left and there is no proper record of where the stuff is. And so the SOPs for lab work, all of this is not documented very well. And experimental setup has been mothballed, dismantled, used for parts. Happens, right? And data, so all of this means all of those are problems from your side, but the other problem is that sometimes startups or the licensees also tend to kind of take advantage of this know-how transfer and almost make it a consulting. So that boundary also is something tech transfer officers have to manage. But most of that is the issues I have faced when I license technology and try to build, oh, now we have to scale this up, and a lot of data is missing. And yeah, there are nice charts in the patent, but when I try to find the data behind that patent, it's buried somewhere in the labs, which is not accessible. Compliance. So, okay, so you've done the tech transfer and all of that. And compliance is where many of these issues around perpetual versus, limited license, all of this can be managed very effectively. Because compliance is where, I mean, you have a technology bundle, you kind of ensure the invoices go on time, the payments get done on time, equity gets tracked, like, okay, a startup goes through a lot of different changes, right? And you keep track of your equity, all of that happens with compliance. I don't know how strong the compliance is in the tech transfer offices around, but I mean, we did get invoices on time, so I guess that part works, but I don't know about the rest of it. Okay, and ensure that balance is maintained in tech transfer. Timely, we say, okay, you do the prosecution, we will pay for it. Okay, then you have to ensure that the timelines are kept in mind. 3 months advance notice for nationalization, at least a month and a half for PCT. Give enough time for them to make the decisions, so because it takes time, and ensure the capital. And registration of rights, because once the patent is issued, you can, as a licensee, we can request you to register our license rights with the patent office. Tracking of assignment of license because it changes hands, and keeping track of all these obligations that the people need to go. That's all, day-to-day operation. But then, non-compliance also happens because they don't have money, they really wanted to not pay you, they say, okay, see what they can do, all of this. So timely action is important. If the money is due and they don't come, within 24 hours they're getting a call from the TTO. They know they have to pay you on time. Okay, and the flexibility, when they're genuinely training and they have difficulties, like the startups, having that flexibility to work with them. And dispute resolution, escalation, because sometimes, we thought this, you thought that, happens all the time. And warranty indemnification. These, generally, most IP from research institutions is given without any warranty, use as is. Indemnification sometimes arises. And clawbacks. Okay, you've given perpetual license, they are not performing, yank back. You've given them exclusive license, they are not performing, yank back. So those clawbacks are more effective, at least gives them a fair chance at success, but enough of a stick to take it back. So again, keeping this big picture in mind and the complexity of commercializing some of these technologies helps draft the agreements in a way that helps actually transition these technologies to the market and create the impact that we need to. And if you do it right, you build that relationship, they will come back to you and say, oh, you know what, we are looking for this technology, we are looking for that technology. Who doesn't want to kind of go back to the same institution and get more if things are working out, right? Yeah, so this is kind of a summary of this section of it, which is right policy, considerations around long commercialization time, ecosystem factors, and the necessity for partnerships and all of that on the road to commercialization, and your role in all of this. So it's a choice between the earth we have and the earth we don't want, because we don't have a plan B. We can always consider that it's not my problem, startup's problem, policy problem, all of that. But ultimately, it's the innovators and entrepreneurs that are helping us solve this problem. Let's support them. And it's a choice we all make. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Madam, it was really very nice talk, and it was really very interesting to go into all the climate tech process and all those things. So I have a very small question, that climate tech process, the product is always costlier than the counterpart. I will give an example of CNG in a market. India gets CNG at 45 to 50 rupees a kg, and yeah, it is got sold at 92 rupees. But when we make it in India through climate friendly processes, it is the manufacturing cost itself is a 45 rupees. So how to tackle this, and how government should support such initiatives?
The policy lever is what we are talking about. So, I mean, if the carbon markets worked, or if there are incentives to produce or use, I mean, if you generate the demand, the supply follows. So, policies to enable these two. So, that's why policy is an important lever for us.
And another quick, it's not a question, but I always have this in my mind. EV is really a future, or it is just a transition between the next level of technology? Because India don't have enough electricity to light up the villages, and we still have a problem of load shedding. So, do we really have electricity to charge our vehicles?
Okay. I guess the way I look at it, in the long term, everything is a transition phase because fossil fuels are between whale oil and EV, right? And tomorrow there might be something else. I mean, nuclear fusion that I can, the back to the future kind of idea. Who knows? So I think, I mean, EVs are there for now for the applications that are suitable. And I always believe that the right tool for the right job. So EVs have their place, hydrogen has its place, everything has its place. And yeah, they will survive together till we get to a stage where one will dominate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting all this entire section into perspective. And we now move on to the next section in this sixth session, which is lessons from the FLCTD program. And I have the pleasure of welcoming Nitesh to the session. Nitesh, you are able to hear us, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. So let me briefly introduce Nitesh. Nitesh is the national expert for technology transfer at UNIDO. He leads efforts to strengthen India's technology transfer ecosystem. With 13 plus years of experience, he specializes in innovation, entrepreneurship and policy interventions, facilitating the commercialization of technologies for sustainable development and industry transformation. So Nitesh, thank you for joining us from New Delhi and handing over the session to you. I'll just stop sharing so that you can share your slides.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mugdha, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I hope everybody is having a good time at the training session. So, in FLCTD yesterday, you all heard a brief introduction about the program. So you know what all we do, what is the overall scale of the program, what is the scope of activities that we do. So while we've been working with all these startups, we've looked at close to 1,500 applications, and now the portfolio is 144, and then towards commercialization. So while we've been doing this, there's been a lot of learnings on the fly, a lot of consultations where we've got very good insights. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to share it with everybody, what all we have learned, and also put it into perspective so that whenever you're reflecting at your own operations and you come across any questions, or if something that I mentioned here triggers a question, now would be a great opportunity to engage with the mentors, to the subject experts, to talk about these things, to get deeper and get some insights that you can take back to your own host institutions, your home institutions, and possibly drive that change. So with that intent, I have this presentation. It's mostly words, not very pictorial, but as you find interesting, wherever you want to discuss anything, feel free. So I'll just share my screen. I'm not very familiar with Zoom, so just bear with me. Okay, is the screen visible? And going full screen now.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it full screen?
Yeah, it's full screen.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll start with a quick backgrounder of the FLCTD, since for most of you, yesterday was the first time you got to know about the program. So what we exactly did, and I will come back to it, like why was this important? Why this backgrounder was important here. So first is the main flagship activity of the program is the annual innovation challenge. That is where we got the guidance based on our project document. We can also call it the mandate that we had. And then the goal was to commercialize technologies. So it was not to just support them, not to do the validation. Validation is part of the process, but the ultimate goal that we had was to commercialize. So the idea is that we have to see them in the market. So first was this innovation challenge. When we realized the innovation challenge is serving only limited purpose in the overall journey to commercialization, because there are always startups who have not yet reached that stage where you can give them money to validate in real life conditions. They need a little bit more hand holding before that. Then we came up with the accelerator program. So accelerator program came into existence. It was not part of the original guidance that we had. Then we also realize that successful validations don't necessarily translate to market interest, and thus commercialization doesn't happen on its own. Then we thought we need something else to bridge that gap from a successfully commercialized technology to become commercially attractive technology. So that is where you see this financing and this financial due diligence and fundraising support vertical that came into existence. Again, that was not part of the original guidance that we had. Throughout the process, we started with 1,476 applications. There was a lot of filtering, and then ultimately now we have 140 startups, out of which we've given money to 88 of them, and about 53 have been validated. And this number, this 38 commercialized, currently stands at about 44. And we are expecting this number to go higher because we still have 16 solutions which are under validation. So this was one side of activities where we work directly with the innovators or the entrepreneurs. Then we also have this another set in the guidance that we had, and why I'm referring to this guidance time and again, because when you establish your own tech commercialization centers or TTO, you may have a certain document. And then and in my experience of interacting with a lot of TTOs, some of them would treat it like the ultimate truth. Document mein, this is what is written in the document. I can't go beyond that. While others are a bit more, I would say, more creative. They would say, okay, the document gives me certain guidance. I have to achieve this. Let me figure out ways to achieve that. That is why I keep on repeating that word guidance. So the guidance that we had, it mentioned establishing providing technical support for establishing a tech transfer support facility. But then we realized that the activity is already picked up in the country because the guidance was written in 2014. Project has been going on. It started in 2017. 18 is when we picked up momentum. By the time we reached here, we were already in 2021. So a substantial amount of time had already passed. So then we decided, okay, let's, instead of creating a new center, we would rather work with the ecosystem and see how can we strengthen that ecosystem. To do that, again, one is I can have a small focus group of very senior people, sit down, talk about things, come up with a document, and then design an intervention. Another would be to go to the ground, to the field, to the practitioners operating at multiple levels, get their feedback, and then come up with a intervention that is of value to everyone. And that is what we did. So we did this study. Idea was to verify existing centers, networks, capabilities, then establish a as is.
Nitesh, can you still hear us? Because we can't hear you. त्याला call करेल. He's dropped off. Yeah, just give us a moment. We can see you now. Just unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. So power has been very erratic here since last night. Uh, so we may have this again. So yeah, there is presentation.
We can see your slides. You just need to go full
Yeah,
screen. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just doing full screen. So when we did this gap finding study, the one was to verify what is already existing, draw as is status, and identify bottleneck gaps and bottlenecks. Again, this study was not part of the original guidance. Neither was all these activities. But then to achieve that goal, we figure out this is the best pathway to do that. What all we did? We looked at the entire ecosystem. We created a long list of 524 institutions, organizations. It's a mixture of cells and different kind of structures who claim to be doing tech transfer. Then we created a shortlist based on a shortlisting criteria, 59, and then we wrote to everybody. Out of those 59, about 30 people responded, and then we visited 26 of them, and ultimately 25 participated in the study. One institution, after we visited, they decided not to be a part of the study, which is completely all right. But we still managed to cover a very good part of the ecosystem, a very good representation geographically as well, and also in the diversity of these higher education institutions and R&D laboratories that we have. To look at what we are doing and sort of as a comparison, we also looked at good practices from 5 international ecosystems. One is to understand how are we different, and second is to see if some of the problems or challenges that we face today, if they've already been solved by others, we can look at them and get inspired and see if any of it is relevant to what we are doing. So with that entire thing, we did the study. This was the important part. So we looked at the tech transfer ecosystem across these 7 attributes. These attributes are taken from the Oslo manual, so it's heavily inspired by that. These attributes were then converted into sub attributes and then 42 question ka questionnaire. Now these questions is something again we did in a very consultative manner, because direct transition from that manual, which comes from OECD, we may run into situations where we simply don't have the data. So these questions again were consultative, so that we knew that people maintain some sort of data repository and we will get responses. Based on all this, the experience of working with the startups, which are in tech space, deep tech, most of them have patents, multiple patents. Most of them have a professor in or a senior scientist in advisory role, mentor role, or part of the active startup. Some of them also have trans-border things, where the company is in USA, operating in India, etc., etc. And the study. Now I have the list of learnings from the program. So first is the most important learning that we had was look beyond the TRLs. So we see a lot of people, a lot of institutions still stuck in the TRL stage or TRL way of linear thinking. What that does is you're focusing too much on the technology and kind of missing the commercialization aspect of it. What I mean by that is we're looking a lot on the scientific side of things, but not on the adoption side of things. That means the people who are going to further work on your technologies after you've transferred it or after you have you brought in new team members, let's say, to develop the technology into a product. So how we were able to work across is we looked at this adoption readiness levels, and right from the demonstration stage, we started having these adoption considerations in our process design. So whatever support we were providing, right from this, you see this part, accelerator innovation and fundraising and commercialization, we started involving the aspects of adoption there. So adoption aspects also look at the techno-economic parameters. They also look at the supply chain things. They also look at the overall maturity of the market to absorb that innovation. Why this is also helpful is it allows you to skip some of these steps. You can kind of leapfrog from, let's say, the simulation phase. And if you find a good partner, you have good support structure, you can directly go for on-field deployments. So that will make the process faster. Another reason is some in a lot of cases we have resources are fairly limited. So if we try to follow a very linear pathway, the opportunity window may simply pass, and the technology which used to be hot may start going towards obsolescence. So that is why this has been the most powerful learning. Look beyond the TRLs and think in terms of adoption. Who is going to take up this technology and convert it into a products, and who are going to use those products. So this is how it mostly looks like. Instead of a linear thing, it works across dimensions, and ultimately it leads to commercial success. So how we managed to do that is, and what is the impact of looking at this ARL approach or looking beyond the TRLs? You can provide very, very effective support in terms of curation, where you can do the right kind of matchmaking. I'm sure all of you in your experience have realized that matchmaking bit is very critical. You can't just do a shotgun approach, spray and spray, send out the message, and then hope somebody would resonate and come back. It has to be very, very targeted, very, very focused to the kind of stakeholder, to the people that you're targeting. And ultimately, all of this comes into the picture. The validations have to be very customized. The investors, the industry introductions, the stakeholders. If you're looking for grants, again, so all of this has to be very well matched to what exactly are you trying to achieve here. Next is the vision and the purpose. So this has also been a very important learning. What exactly are you trying to do here? So, for example, in our case, we wanted to commercialize. So, this focus on commercialization led to all those additional interventions which were not part of the original guidance of the project that we had. So, similarly, if you have a very clear vision of why are you doing this and what is it that you want to achieve, that makes you agile and allows you to create interventions or create sort of supporting structures that will help you throughout that journey. Otherwise, the risk is that we become very rigid and we miss out on a lot of good opportunities. Next is, so we have to engage with stakeholders, right? So, and it's very, if you play ping pong with the stakeholders, you go to them, then they come back to you, and then it becomes a very hard set kind of a process. It loses the charm, the appeal, and also it becomes very rigid. So it's good to have integrated feedback loops, especially in the tech transfer study that we did. We found it very clearly that institutions who were able to customize, adapt, and were agile in their decision making, they had higher success of commercializing their products, their technologies, their licenses. Second is, not everybody will come with the same degree of sophistication that you are used to or that you have already reached. So that is also a very good consideration. So we have tech transfer offices in the country where they have taken a sort of a conscious choice about the kind of clients they want to deal with. Some of them only want to work with large ticket buyers. Some of them want to work with SMEs only. Then your language, your presentation, everything has to adapt to your end user, your target user, right? So that is the second learning. And one size fits all approach, it doesn't work. In your documentation, in your offerings, in your presentation, it has to adapt to your target audience. So that is very, very important. Next is you have to institutionalize the validation process. And what I mean by that is One is documentation. I've seen TTOs, excellent documentation in terms of IP, but in terms of technology evolution, technology development, case studies, and that is where they're severely lacking. It's not a general comment. It's just what has been observed. So you institutionalize your validation process, treat it like a project management thing, which I've also marked it as another separate learning, and document the case studies, the efficacy that is achieved. Please document that. The results, please document them. Do field trials and get third party validations. If I keep on saying I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, doesn't mean much. But if two other people say yes, the results are excellent, it's a great candidate or great technology, that holds a lot of weight. So within TTOs also you can do that. You can share information with each other and try to get feedback or testimonials. So that's a very grassroots level of trying to build a community also and sort of trust. And then eventually, as and when the grants and the funding situation, the demands, everything improves, you can go to more sophisticated, more formalized ways of doing this. Next is this is also very important. So in our program, we have a pool of about 95 mentors who come from different levels of experience. And you have to build that trust with the stakeholders, with the industry. If you're only approaching them through formal channels with an offer every time, the relationship becomes very transactional and you lose a lot of insights into what is actually required and you may end up actually losing business. So it's important to send regular updates, like I mentioned, targeted to your target audience. Then informal communication. Most of the TTOs within the study who reported that they're doing really well, they also have an informal channel of communication. Then a solution oriented environment. If every time we are discussing this is not possible, this is the problem, this is the thing, a lot of people will lose interest in your negotiation, in your conversations. And then it also leads to this very fence sitting behavior. You will see people or interested parties that come to you, they hang around for a very long time, but they will not do sign the dotted line. The deal doesn't happen. They'll show a lot of interest. Whenever there's an event, they will show up. They'll ask a lot of questions, but they will not sign that deal. So, but the moment you start approaching things in a solution oriented manner, a lot of things move forward. And then ultimately, like I mentioned, this large pool of mentors and advisors, every step requires a different kind of a specialized mentor, and that helps a lot. This is extremely important, especially in our case, because most of our tech transfer offices are nested within host institutions. And then there are also cases where the TTO would, let's say, not qualify a candidate technology, and then they would bypass the TTO, go to the senior management and tell them ki, "Arey, these guys are not giving me the opportunity or not taking up the technology, etc., etc." And then you may end up with an email which says, "Take them also, make them part of the process," which is sort of your resources get strained. So here is one way to one is your selection panel, the process, everything has to be very transparent. Then your selection panel needs regular briefings. Why? Because the process has to be guided by the strategic outcomes and not by the feelings of the panel. In our project also, we do this as a regular exercise because everybody is passionate about their cause, right? So then every once in a while, we bring them in and give them a briefing of what exactly we want. What is the strategic goal outcome that we are trying to achieve? That helps to slow down the emotions, take out the bias in the process, and look at things objectively. Another thing very important is change the panel composition as per your evolving needs. Every technology which is at different levels of maturity requires a very different lens of looking at it. Looking at a TRL3 and TRL8 is entirely different. But if you have one single panel doing the job, it's very easy to to get the biases coming in or miss out the nuances which are important to make the right selection. So have a larger pool. That is why in my previous slides I suggested have a much larger pool and then invite people as per your needs for those panels. And then you as the people running the TTO, give them enough independence and space to operate. In within our program, the PMU, we do the due diligence, we do the shortlisting, but the actual selection, we have no say in that selection. We maintain an arm's length. There have been cases where contracts have been terminated. Again, contracts of the startups who had received financial support, they've been terminated due to XYZ reasons. Again, it comes to the expert panel. Let the expert panel decide. What we do is we give them briefings before the panel sits in. Why? Because we want to highlight the strategic outcomes that have to be achieved. And then a debrief after the panel has done their job to sort of sensitize them on the message that they can take out of the system. And while the panel is in assembly, they're doing their job. We maintain an arm's length, and we do not interfere in what they're doing. This is very, very important. There'll be a lot of cases. People come back if they don't get selected. They feel bad. There are also cases of emotional outburst and everything. And sometimes people also get personal. All of this, you can shield your organization, your TTO, your cell, and yourself. Again, extremely important. Yourself as well. If you have all of this in place, if your panel works in a very transparent manner based on very specific briefings and everything, you have documentary proof. And there's a larger possibility or a better possibility to defend yourself in case there's a cross questioning or things go out of hand. This is extremely important. Try to balance things. Currently, in the Indian scenario, so the three pillars of tech commercialization. IP includes filing, managing your IP, tracking, etc. Finance, that also includes administration and deal design, contracting, structures of the deals, etc. And then marketing, that includes communication. What we have seen currently is we are going very heavy on the IP side, the finance a little bit, but marketing, especially the communication, the right kind of communication, it has not evolved to the levels it should be. So there's a lot of gaps still. Try to strike a balance with whatever resources you have. And how you can do that is make clear decisions in terms of what all capabilities you're going to have in-house and what are your outsourcing needs. So we have seen TTOs at very good reputed places. Every year is an experimentation. This year we are hiring this, next year, okay. So what happens is if you don't give that visibility in terms of requirement, in terms of employment, etc., it becomes very difficult for people to bring in their best every day. So what happens is if you have a very clear matrix of what you want in-house and what are you going to outsource, it gives a sense of security to people who are part of your team. It works as a motivation. Within the current TTO setup, we've also seen a lot of career anxiety where the early career practitioners, they're not yet very sure of they want to continue in this line. And the very senior practitioners, they're also kind of trying to figure out their feet in the ecosystem and grow in what direction. That's the most common question, especially if somebody has spent like 15 years and above. It's a very common question that comes to everybody. So here, if you have very clear demarcation of what are you going to have in-house, what are your outsourcing needs, what kind of boards, panels, committees, etc. you're going to have, it gives very good visibility and predictability to everyone who's part of the TTO and who's part of the ecosystem. So that balanced approach is extremely important. Another thing is currently in the Indian ecosystem, we have mostly three kinds of players, practitioners. One is we have these RTTPs who have the RTTP certification accreditation. Then we also have people who have been trained by WIPO, so they have done some courses from WIPO. And then we also have people who have learned through experience. They may or may not have an MBA in marketing or finance, or they come from the traditional sciences and then ultimately get exposed to this line of things and want to build a career here. Even to strike a balance in these three perspectives, this kind of clarity is required because all three have their own strengths. And for us, for a TTO to be able to leverage all this, first, this in-house clarity is required. What capabilities you need in-house and what kind of outsourcing needs you have. By the way, if you look at the study report that is available on our project website, there is a suggestive management structure which gives very good visibility into what kind of roles you can have in-house and what kind of roles you can outsource. It's an infographic, very easy to look at, very easy to digest. I would request everybody to spend some time looking at that infographic and see if it is relevant, if it adds value to your TTO design and operations. Then this is also extremely important. You have to look beyond consultancy and projects and long-term use of assets. Why I make this point is, I'll give very specific examples. So we give money for validations, right? And we tried working with academic institutions. We mostly work with startups, but we are also open to academic institutions. In some cases, we got a response from the PI or the lead professor that the dean is saying, why are you spending time on this UNIDO contract if they are not giving us enough overheads? But now this is a question of the intent and the overall orientation. Validation of technology. It's not UNIDO's technology. It is your technology, your institution. We have a program where we fund this effort. Again, we are not getting anything back out of it. We are not taking any equity. It's not an investment that comes with the let's say the clause for ROI, etc., etc. But even for that, if I have to pay consultancy charges and overheads, etc., etc., it becomes it's a non-mover for me. The contract will simply not happen, and that is how it happened actually. Similarly, there are also cases where we fund equipment, uh, equipment that is useful for certain technology validations, but I'm sure would also be useful for other technology validations. But then we also run into problems with universities where people come back and say, "Oh, you are paying for the equipment, but you've not paid for scrapping this equipment at the end of the project." So here you have to look at the long-term use of assets. And here another problem is lot of TTOs don't. If the situation has changed in the past couple of years, I don't know. But a lot of TTOs don't have a suitable structure to receive this kind of help or this kind of support. In the previous innovation challenge, we had specifically marked in the terms of reference that technologies at TRL 3, TRL 4, where there is an interest from the industry and they want to conduct laboratory validations, we can help up to $30,000 for doing those validations. I got some phone calls, like people did not submit the application first. I got the phone calls and people specifically wanted to know who is going to get this money. Is it the professor or the industry? We wanted to give this money to the tech transfer offices because ideally they should be leading this effort. They are going to design the deals, they are going to do the contracting, they are going to have receive feedback and pass it on and being an integrated part of the overall deal. So we wanted the TTOs to get that money so that they can drive this entire process. Because another gap that we have in the current ecosystem is we have it's very good that the number of practitioners is getting higher, but the amount of deal experience is still very small as compared to the number of practitioners that we have. The number of deals signed is still very small. So we thought this will be a great way to stimulate that activity. And but then not a single TTO came back with the right kind of structure where we could give them that money. Or in a lot of cases, they did not have the right, uh, if I can say, the right seat on the board or the planning committee where they could drive that effort. They could not take ownership of this initiative. And that way, we honestly, we did not receive even a single application. While designing the terms of reference, a lot of people have said, yes, yes, this is good initiative. We definitely want to take advantage of it. But when it comes to actual rolling out the initiative and passing on the support, we simply could not do that because of that structural mismatch or the policy mismatch. So again, so TTOs need to be positioned in a way that you can take advantage of these kind of support that is available. Uh, Documentation again extremely important, and there has to be some way of performance evaluation also. So most of the TTOs that I have mentioned, they would report their progress or activities as part of the institution's annual report. Uh, so it's a small section within that report. Some of them also do coffee tables. I've seen a lot of coffee tables where they talk about workshops or some star patents if those kind of deals have happened. What we don't see is talking in terms of the impact, because I'm sure by now all of us understand TTO is a very strategic function. It may not be as directly linked to profits as people had perceived, but strategic role of a tech transfer office is hard to dispute that. So if we are not reporting that impact, then that strategic outcome never gets highlighted. So what that leads to is the institutions don't understand how to position their tech transfer offices. See, incubators is fairly simple. Number of startups, you report, and there is a certain amount of visibility attached to it because uh, startups will ultimately raise money. They will get some VC. So there's eyeballs that come to that. There's a bit of glamour attached to it. Tech transfer offices, if we are not reporting that impact, so the institutions also don't know how to position it. I'm sure, especially those of you who come from institutions where there are several such projects, where the implicit understanding is that it will lead to technology commercialization. You may also find it difficult to find your feet within your internal ecosystem, or to continuously kind of convince the senior management of the value a standalone tech transfer office brings to the institution. And one reason for that is because we are not reporting the impact. And while we report impact, it also requires evaluation of the overall performance of the TTO. How that can be achieved? Only through effective documentation. And how you will get the documentation? If we have institutionalized our processes and there is a structured approach to what we do. It has to be very customized and customizable, but still it has to be grounded in a certain structure. This is where I've seen a lot of TTOs or a lot of negotiations break. This perception versus function conflicts. The assumption is if somebody is coming to you, they're coming with an expectation that they will find something that will solve their problems. Either there's been a recommendation, or there's been an implicit market push that has driven them to you. But if they find a difference in perception or function, I'll explain this a little bit more. Uh, then it leads to erosion of that trust. What that
Nitesh,
means is,
can
sorry.
we close in another 2-3 minutes? They are
Yes, I think
eating
this is
into their
the
lunch
last slide.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So perception versus function. Lot of TTOs that we visited, we studied. Everybody claimed that they provide financial support or support in financial planning of technology development, or they provide some kind of financial mentoring to their startups. But at the same time, more than 80% of the TTOs also mentioned that they don't have any financial expert in their panel or their teams. This is what I mean by perception versus function conflicts. You don't have that expertise. How are you providing that support? If it is grounded in experience, it has to be mentioned that. Otherwise, these kind of questions they translate into doubts, and when doubts creep in, it leads to erosion of that trust. Similarly, transparency in the processes. If they don't know what to expect, they will always be scared to share. There will always be aversion to share more information, more detail, more insights, more requirements. It actually translates into loss of opportunity for the TTO itself. Consultative approach in terms of what exactly are they looking for. There's a tendency to oversell. There may also be a tendency to undersell. Industry is looking for solutions. Solutions that can be, in the ideal case, deployed. If not directly deployable, then co-developed and deployed. There's a little bit of flavor of co-development that is coming in now. So, but they want transparency there. And then they also want uh, the the academic side or the let's say the knowledge supplier to understand their needs first. So that is where, because if that is not happening, it leads to the direct erosion of trust, and then we see that fence sitting behavior. People will come in, they'll spend time, they'll just keep on coming back, but not sign the deal. And ultimately, this integrated feedback. Very few people have patience for end of the process feedback interview. I'm sure all of you've been to, you go to restaurants, and at the end of the meal, if they come up with this form and ask you to fill it out, how many of us do it diligently and truly? I really doubt. So it has to be integrated within the process. You have to identify your cues and then note the response to those cues and turn that into feedback for you. Once that happens, it builds more confidence. So with this, I'll stop here. So this is what we have learned in the FLCTD program in a brief. If there are any questions or anything you want to discuss further, I'm happy to join the discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for your attention and patience.
Yeah. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Nitesh, for summarizing this extensive study briefly. I think since we are running into the lunchtime, can we take questions later on, or like if there are any? Okay. Nitesh के लिए कुछ questions है तो quickly we can have one or two.
There is one question I had. You mentioned about ARL. Nitesh, first of all, thank you so much. You mentioned about ARL. Maybe you can choose to answer, or if you are learning late, maybe in evaluation session. Adoption readiness level, if you can throw a little more light on the indices, what we can look at when it comes to ARL, or it is too subjective to the sector and the product or tech, sorry. If you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so ARLs, if you remember 2014, so there's this Department of Energy, US government, they have this ARPA-E program. So 2014, this lab had released this commercialization readiness levels. And in 2023, I think the paper was released. They've released an updated version of these commercialization readiness levels, which are called ARS or adoption readiness levels. It comes along with a tool, they call it CARET, where you can measure the readiness for adoption. It's a similar nine scale tool, and here they have clustered like 1 to 3, then 3 to 6, and 6 to 9. 6 to 9 is where there's the full readiness for adoption. 3 to 6 is where there's still work to be done, and 1 to 3 is generally which is too early and requires substantial preparation. In our experience, when drawing parallels between TRLs and ARLs, TRL 5 is the inflection point. The moment you hit TRL 5, you can start driving your journey in terms of adoptions. Before that, especially if you're in deep tech or emerging technologies, it makes more sense to stick to the TRL scale, then start looking at the ARLs. It looks at technologies and their adoption in terms of 14 different parameters. Uh, what I can do is I can share that paper or the link to the ARL and Carrot tool with Mugdha, and she can circulate it with everyone. Will that be okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
You.